This is a Kohler engine, model K161, with a recoil starter. The recoil is sluggish and it chatters sometimes. It just needs lubed up. I need to take it apart and get it lubed in the right places. The first thing I need to do is get into the handle and get the knot. I'm going to put some vice grips on here to keep the rope from retracting. After a knot's been tied for 20 years, it gets kind of hard. I'm going to poke this scribe in between the wraps to see if I can loosen it up a bit. Alright, that's not doing very much. The knot's so tight I can't get the scribe through it anywhere. I'm going to try a different theory using some vice grip pliers. The rope's deforming and slipping out of the vice grips, but the knot isn't as hard as it was. I'm going to keep re-gripping it and working at it. Well, there it is. That worked pretty well. This thing is still spring loaded, so I'm going to grip the rope while I get the vice grips off. I'm going to let it retract to where the rope's ready to go through the hole, and then find this slot or mouse hole. I'm going to put the rope in that slot so it can get past these ribs here, and I'm going to count how many times it turns before the spring pressure goes away. So there's one, and there's two, so it was about 3 full turns of spring wind up. Now everything's held together by this one screw. I'm going to put the screw back in there and keep these parts together for now. Notice there's a spring here you don't want to lose. It goes on that peg there when I put it back together. I'm going to take out these 3 parts. They're all the same. Just make sure they're not damaged. And under here is the big spring. This part should lift out and the spring should stay there. Here's the reason to be in here. The grease is dried hard, so I have to scrape all that off. That spring's under pressure there because it's squeezed into that cavity. I'm not going to take that out unless I have to. I want to degrease this housing, but I don't want to degrease the spring. I'll clean it with WD-40 so the spring won't be totally dry. I'll clean all the smaller parts in some solvent. This spring is different on each end, so try to remember how that goes. These two parts are stuck together with dried grease. Okay, there's a problem here. When this part slides over the shaft, that little slot there has to go over the bent end of this spring. And that won't happen unless the end of this spring is resting in the right place. So it has to be over here next to that pin. I'm going to try to bend this spring to fix it. These springs come in different sizes, and some are easier to bend than others. So I'll be experimenting for a bit, bending it with a little more force each time until I get it to move. If you bend it too tight, it might break. It don't seem to be moving yet. I want to make sure you can't just push this over to the slot. That don't work because the spring don't engage until the last little bit of travel. It might work if you had a really thin screwdriver. I'm going back to my first theory. I know it works, I just didn't apply enough pressure yet. I have to pull the spring out some to have room to squeeze it in the right place. Hey, that was the one that did it. See, the end of that spring is resting near the pin now. Here comes Jake.
What are you doing, dog boy?
Bumped into the camera there.
Look, I'm almost done here.
Now this should slide on there and engage with the spring. This rope is interfering with the ribs in the housing here, so I have to tuck it into the mouse hole. Okay, you can see that spring is engaged when you turn it. And as long as the end of that spring stays near the post, I can put this together and have it work every time. It's ready to go back together. I'm putting grease on the side of this spring because that's where the rope pulley rides. And I put grease on the wide face of the spring because it rubs itself as it works. I'm rotating this to make sure the spring's engaged. If you put these parts in backwards, they stick out too far and you won't get it together. I'm pretty much putting grease on everything that moves. This cup goes on next. Make sure all the fingers go in and out about the same as you rotate it. And look at the cup to make sure these 3 slots are the same. If one of the tabs is bent different, that finger won't work right. One of the tabs has a hole for the spring. This is the spring steel clutch. It fits on this cup, and it keeps the cup from rotating until the fingers get out. This little washer is thicker than the cup, so when you tighten the bolt, the spring steel clutch is clamped to the housing under the washer, but the cup can rotate around the washer. This bigger washer is on the back, so when the rope pulley rotates, it rides on the washer, not on the spring steel clutch. I'm going to put grease under this big washer where the rope pulley rides on it. Now I got to get this little spring in here. There's only one hole in the cup. I want to make sure the spring is on the right way. And it has to slide over this post here when it goes together. You can tell if you got the spring on there right if it springs back when you rotate it. I put grease under this big washer here where the cup rotates against it. I'm having trouble getting the screw started, but I don't want to cross thread it. I want to put grease on these fingers too. Now the cup should rotate and move the fingers out, and you can feel the spring steel clutch lightly gripping the cup. I'm ready to bring the rope out, so I'm going to force it in the mouse hole again, and I'm going to wind up the spring just one turn to see how it feels. Remember, I counted 3 turns of wind up when I took it apart. but you're pulling against that spring pressure when you try to start the engine, so I like to keep it minimal. Yeah, see, that returns reliably with just one turn if everything's working right. I want to tie the rope just like it was. It's been tied so long it has a shape to it now. I think that's the way it was, so I'm going to tighten it with some vice grips. The knot just barely fits into this metal piece. Based on the shape of the knot, it looks like it would fit better coming in from this end. Okay, that looks good. Feels smooth, easy to operate. So here you can see how it works. Remember that spring steel clutch part's gripping on the inside of this cup. And that spring steel clutch is screwed to the housing with that one screw so it don't move. Here's a different starter that has the rope pulley removed, but all the washers are in there as they should be. And you can see how that spring steel clutch is screwed down and can't move. The rope pulley and the cup that holds the fingers rotate around that post. When I pull the rope pulley rotates under the cup, and that action moves the fingers out. As I pull farther, when the fingers can't go out anymore, I'm overcoming the grip that the spring steel clutch has on the cup, and the whole thing rotates together as it's engaged. That spring steel clutch also works the other direction. As you can see, when you release the rope, the fingers retract before the cup starts turning with the rest of it. Well, I just remembered that I forgot something. I didn't put grease on the spring steel clutch thing, so now's my chance to go back and fix it. When I put the screws in the first time, I snug them up and back them out half a turn. Then when I have all of them just a half a turn loose, I rotate the starter one way or the other and hold it rotated while I tighten the screws. That should get it close to centered in the flywheel cover hole. Some starters will have a little pin that lines the center of the starter up with the center of the crankshaft. If you have a pin, tighten the starter where the pin wants it to be. That looks good. The handle returns to the right position, so I'm claiming that 1 revolution of spring wind up is enough for this one. If the handle's always drooping down when it returns, then you might want more spring wind up. Alright, that's it.